Look at the walls around you, knock on them. They are hollow. In 2024, while the rest of the developed world built fortresses of concrete and masonry designed to stand for over a century, 94% of all new American homes were constructed from nothing more than dimensional lumber and drywall. These structures have a functional shelf life of barely 70 years, yet you will spend the prime of your life shackled to the debt required to own one. The median age of a first-time homebuyer has now hit a historic high of 40. You are entering the market a decade later than your parents, fighting for a home that is physically shrinking in size, built with materials that are chemically engineered to rot. Why is the wealthiest nation on earth addicted to disposable housing? The answer isn't culture. It is a systemic economic trap designed to keep you building, buying, and borrowing until the day you die. To understand why the American skyline is dominated by timber, we must first confront a fundamental divergence in philosophy. In Europe, specifically in nations like Germany, a home is constructed as an intergenerational asset. Utilizing masonry, concrete, and block, these structures are engineered to endure for 120 years or more, before requiring structural intervention. They are legacies. Here in the United States, we do not build legacies. We manufacture commodities. The standard stick-framed American home, composed of 2x4 lumber and drywall, has a functional lifespan of approximately 70 years. We are building disposable infrastructure for a disposable economy. The question remains, why do we persist with an inferior method of construction? The industry will tell you it is a matter of tradition. The data tells us it is a matter of survival. The primary driver of this phenomenon is affordability, but not in the way you might expect. To grasp the mechanics of this market, we must dissect 4 specific variables that make the American housing landscape unique and increasingly hostile. The first variable is our addiction to sheer volume. The American consumer demands space on a scale that the rest of the world finds incomprehensible. If we look at global population distribution, the average home size outside the United States hovers around 900 square feet, or roughly 84 square meters. In the United States, despite recent economic pressures, that number is staggering. Historically, the average new home size swelled to over 2,400 square feet. This is a structure 270% larger than its international counterpart. However, the 2024-2025 data reveals a crack in this facade. For the first time, we are witnessing shrinkflation in real estate. The median size of a new home has contracted to between 2,146 and 2,384 square feet. Builders are quietly cutting square footage to keep sticker prices within reach of a population that is slowly running out of money. Yet even this reduced footprint is massive by global standards. You cannot build a 2,200 square foot fortress of brick and concrete at a price point the average American can absorb. To maintain the illusion of vast personal space, we must sacrifice the integrity of the walls themselves. The second factor is the land beneath our feet. The United States is an anomaly of geography, boasting 4.86 hectares of arable land per person, compared to a global average of just 1.92. We possess a landmass 550% larger per capita than the rest of the world. This abundance encouraged a horizontal sprawl, suburbs that stretch into infinity, necessitating a construction method that is lightweight, transportable, and rapid. But this resource is no longer infinite in practice. The median lot size for a new single-family home has collapsed to just 8,506 square feet, less than 1/5 of an acre. We are packing tinderbox houses closer together than ever before, yet we refuse to switch to non-combustible materials. The third factor is the demographic paradox. Inside these cavernous, shrinking homes, there are fewer people to pay for them. The average U.S. household size has fallen to 2.5 people, compared to 3.6 people internationally. We are housing 30% fewer wage earners in structures that are double or triple the size of those in Europe. The math simply does not work without a drastic reduction in material costs. And this brings us to the fourth and perhaps most damning factor, the age of the buyer. In the rest of the world, the average first-time homebuyer is 31 years old. For decades, the U.S. sat comfortably near this metric at 33. But the economic trauma of recent years has shattered this timeline. As of 2024, the median age of a first-time homebuyer in America has skyrocketed to an all-time high of 40 years old. Let that sink in. An entire generation has been locked out of ownership for a decade longer than their predecessors. When a 40-year-old American finally scrapes together enough capital to enter the market, they are not looking for a 120-year legacy asset. They are looking for immediate entry. They are looking for the lowest possible upfront cost. This is where the economics of the stick become a trap. The industry narrative has long been that masonry construction costs 37% more than wood. While this gap is real in the union-heavy labor markets of the North and Midwest, where wood framing dominates with over 95% market share, it is not a universal truth. In the South, particularly Florida, where supply chains are optimized for storm resilience, the premium for concrete block is only 10% to 15%. Yet even a 10% increase is a deal breaker for a consumer base already stretched to its absolute limit. A stick-built home costs roughly $397,000 to construct. Its masonry equivalent would push that price to $544,000. Faced with a $150,000 difference, the American consumer does not hesitate. They choose the extra bedroom. They choose the granite countertop. They choose the 2x4. But this initial affordability is a deception. We are trading upfront savings for a lifetime of maintenance penalties. Wood is organic. It is food for termites, it warps with moisture, and it rots when the sophisticated plastic wraps failing to protect it inevitably degrade. In high-risk zones, insurance premiums for these wood-framed structures are now 30% to 40% higher than for their masonry counterparts. Over a 10-year period, the cost of insuring and repairing a wooden box can easily eclipse the savings of building it. We are not building this way because it is smart. We are building this way because the American economy is built on monthly payments, not long-term value. We prioritize the illusion of wealth, square footage, over the reality of wealth, durability. And as long as the market demands cheap square footage to house a population drowning in debt, the 2x4 will remain the undisputed king of American construction. But affordability is only the first lock on the cage. The second is even more difficult to escape: the velocity of capital. If affordability is the shackle that binds the American consumer to wood, speed is the whip that drives the American builder. In the United States, time is not merely a logistical constraint, it is a financial liability. To understand why stick framing is the undisputed sovereign of the American suburb, we must look beyond the blueprints and into the balance sheets of the developers who shape our reality. The modern housing market operates on the razor's edge of the time value of money. Developers do not build houses with cash, they build with debt. They utilize high-interest construction loans that begin accruing interest the moment the first shovel hits the dirt. Every day a job site sits silent is a day the project bleeds capital. Every month of delay erodes the profit margin. In the high-interest environment of 2024 and 2025, this pressure has intensified into a desperate race against the calendar. The goal is no longer just to build a house. The goal is to exit the loan. This financial urgency creates a biological imperative for speed that masonry simply cannot satisfy. Dimensional lumber is the currency of velocity. Let us examine the metrics. In the United States, the average completion time for a single-family home in 2024 was recorded between 7.6 and 8.6 months from authorization to completion. However, this average is skewed by custom projects. When we isolate spec homes, the standardized units built for sale that constitute the vast majority of new inventory, the timeline compresses even further, dropping to an average of just 6.3 months. Major production builders have refined this assembly line to a point where they can take a raw patch of dirt and turn it into a turnkey residence in under half a year. Compare this to the European model. The German approach to construction, often lauded for its engineering superiority, is a study in patience that the American market refuses to afford. A masonry-built home in Germany typically requires between 10 and 15 months to complete. Recent data suggests this timeline is drifting even further, pushing toward 20 to 26 months due to labor shortages and bureaucratic friction. This is nearly double, sometimes triple, the American timeline. For a nation facing a chronic housing deficit estimated between 3 million and 7 million units, doubling the construction time is not a viable policy option. It is a mathematical impossibility. If the United States were to adopt the masonry standards of Europe tomorrow, the housing supply pipeline would effectively freeze, and the shortage would spiral into a full-blown humanitarian catastrophe. We are trapped in a cycle where we must build fast just to keep the crisis from metastasizing. The technical secret to this speed lies in the evolution of the frame itself. The United States has spent centuries optimizing the skeleton of the house, moving from the dangerous balloon framing of the 19th century, where continuous studs ran from foundation to roof, acting as chimneys during a fire, to the modern platform framing system used today. Platform framing is the engine of American construction velocity. By building one floor at a time, using the subfloor of the first level as the working platform for the second, builders create a natural fire break and a safer work environment. But the true genius of this system is logistical. A wood-framed house can be dried in, meaning the roof is on and windows are installed in a matter of weeks, not months. For a 3,400 square foot home, a skilled framing crew can erect the entire skeleton in less than a month. Once the shell is weather-tight, the interior becomes a hive of parallel activity. This is the shell efficiency. Because stick framing creates hollow wall cavities, electricians, plumbers, and HVAC technicians can work simultaneously, running wires and pipes through the open voids with speed and ease. Contrast this with masonry. A concrete wall is heavy, wet, and unforgiving. You cannot rush the chemistry of curing concrete. You cannot lay the second floor until the first floor's walls have hardened to bear the load. If you need to run electrical conduit, you're often chasing channels into solid rock or adding secondary framing layers, doubling the labor. Masonry is a sequential process. Wood is a parallel process. In a capitalist system that prioritizes quarterly returns, parallel processing wins every time. We can see the real-world application of this in the spec market. Consider a rental property project from a few years ago. A 3,400 square foot structure, significantly larger than the national average. Using stick framing, a builder was able to take that project from a hole in the ground to a fully finished rent-collecting asset in just 4 months. That is the power of the stick. It allows capital to flow. It allows investors to realize returns before the market shifts. However, this obsession with speed has a darker side. It has conditioned the American consumer to accept fragility. We have normalized the idea that a house is something that can be summoned into existence in a single season. We marvel at the efficiency of the framing crew, watching a house rise in days, mistaking speed for progress. This infrastructure of speed is further reinforced by the sheer momentum of the supply chain. The United States has not just standardized the lumber, we have standardized the labor. We have a workforce of millions trained to wield a nail gun, but very few trained to lay a brick. We have a transportation network designed to move lightweight timber, not heavy pallets of stone. To change course now would require retooling the entire industrial base of the continent. So we continue to sprint. We build faster and faster, desperate to outpace the demand, desperate to outrun the interest rates. We are erecting millions of wooden boxes, filling the landscape with assets that are designed to be transacted, not treasured. We have solved the problem of volume. We have solved the problem of speed. But in doing so, we have walked into a trap of our own making, a resource trap that binds us to a material that was never meant to last forever. The final lock on this cage is history itself. The United States did not stumble into this dependency on timber. We were born into it. From the moment the first European settlers arrived, they were confronted with a continent drowning in old-growth forests: chestnut, pine, oak. It was a resource of such staggering abundance that it felt infinite. In the Old World, wood was scarce, a luxury reserved for the elite or the framework of roofs. Here it was a weed. Initially, we built like our ancestors using heavy timber, post and beam construction with mortise and tenon joinery. But this was slow. It required true craftsmanship, and America has never had patience for the slow. The industrial pivot arrived in the 1700s with the water-powered sawmill. This machine didn't just cut wood, it democratized construction. It took the massive, cumbersome logs of the forest and sliced them into dimensional lumber, the early ancestors of the 2x4. Suddenly, you didn't need a master carpenter to build a home. You just needed a laborer who could carry a board. Then came the nail. Until the early 19th century, nails were hand-forged by blacksmiths, expensive and rare. But industrialization brought mass production, and suddenly, the nail and the 2x4 became the DNA of American expansion. It was a match made in industrial heaven. Cheap materials meets cheap labor. By the 1830s, Chicago saw the rise of balloon framing. It was a revolutionary system where long studs ran continuously from the foundation to the roofline. It was fast, it was cheap, and it was deadly. These hollow walls acted as perfect chimneys. If a fire started in the basement, the balloon frame would suck the flames up to the attic in seconds, consuming the structure before the inhabitants could wake up. We didn't abandon wood when our cities burned. We just engineered a better trap. We shifted to platform framing in the early 1900s. The method we still use today. By building one floor at a time, we created fire stops. We added plywood sheathing. We wrapped the houses in plastic. We engineered the danger out of the wood, but we kept the wood. Today, this legacy has calcified into an infrastructure that actively resists innovation. The entire continent is wired to move 2x4s. From the forests of the Pacific Northwest to the aisles of Home Depot, the supply chain is a finely tuned machine designed to perpetuate the stick frame. But in 2025, we are told that technology will save us. We are sold a vision of the future where robots print houses and costs plummet. This is the illusion of technology. Let's look at the reality of 3D printed concrete homes. The media sells this as the solution to the affordability crisis. They show you a nozzle layering cement and promise a revolution. The data shows something else. In 2025, the cost to print a home still hovers between $400,000 and $600,000. It is not cheaper. In fact, printing the walls only addresses about 10% to 20% of a home's total cost. You still need a roof, a foundation, windows, and finishing. Furthermore, the technology is rigid. Integrating plumbing and electrical systems into solid concrete walls is a logistical nightmare compared to the open cavities of a wood frame. And despite the hype, printing a multi-story home remains a complex engineering challenge that the average builder cannot tackle. 3D printing is a distraction, a shiny object that allows us to ignore the systemic failures of the market. There is, however, a technology that actually works. Insulated concrete forms, or ICF. These are Lego-like blocks of foam filled with steel-reinforced concrete. They offer the durability of a bunker with the insulation of a cooler. An ICF home is resistant to hurricanes, rot, and termites. It is quieter and vastly more energy efficient. And the cost premium? In 2025, it is only about 3% to 5% more than a stick-built home. So why aren't we building with it? Why is ICF stuck as a niche product because of inertia? The American construction industry is fragmented and conservative. A framer knows how to cut wood. He does not know how to pour concrete into foam blocks. To switch to ICF would require retraining the workforce, buying new tools, and slowing down the production line while crews learn the new system. In a market driven by the velocity of capital, no developer wants to be the first to slow down, so we reject the superior technology, ICF, and the futuristic technology, 3D printing, in favor of the archaic technology, wood. This brings us to the final uncomfortable truth about the American housing market. It comes down to a fundamental philosophical divergence between the new world and the old. In Europe, a house is a legacy. It is built to last 100 years or more. It is a fortress intended to shelter multiple generations of the same family. In America, a house is a commodity. It is a consumer product no different in spirit from a car or a refrigerator. The average American moves every 8 to 10 years. We do not buy homes to die in. We buy them to build equity, to leverage, and to sell. We treat housing as a financial instrument first and a shelter second. We accept a lifespan of 60 to 70 years for our homes because, in our brutal economic calculus, a house that lasts 100 years is over-engineered. Why pay for a structure that will outlast your mortgage? Why build a legacy when you can flip a profit? The stick-framed house is the perfect architectural embodiment of modern American capitalism, fast, flexible, affordable, in the short term, but ultimately disposable. We have built a civilization that looks permanent, but is structurally temporary. We have solved the housing crisis by lowering our standards, by accepting that the walls around us are temporary, and by convincing ourselves that a wooden box wrapped in plastic purchased with debt is the American dream. But as the climate shifts, as storms grow stronger, and as the cost of insurance and maintenance spirals out of control, we may find that the stick is no longer a tool of expansion, but a pile of kindling waiting for a spark. The system is working exactly as designed. The question is, can you afford to live in it